What's up, everyone? It's Dakota. Welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video, and today we're going to be taking a look at some more leaks of the Modern Horizons 3 set. A little unfortunate considering that, for one, these aren't technically official yet. No one has confirmed them. I believe as of right now, there's only one card that has been leaked that has been confirmed for the set. But we have a preview season starting up on the 21st of this month. So here in a few days as of the posting of this video. So hopefully a lot of those cards will end up getting confirmed on that day. And then hopefully no more leaks by then, because, it feels like there's been a lot of cards that were in the set that, would be kind of like super hype. But, again, we don't know if they're official yet. But of course, in traditional fashion, I'm going to be going over some of the cards I think that are pretty cool and pretty interesting as far as like design is concerned, and finding a potential home for these cards in the modern format and maybe even in the other beyond formats. But of course, before we get too deep into some of the leaks that have occurred over the last week for Modern Horizons 3, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more content, please consider subscribing to the channel. I do a lot of Modern, Pioneer, and other longer form videos such as this, and we're going to be doing a decent amount of previewing some of the previewing some of the spoilers from the set as they kind of come out through the next 10 days starting on May 21st. So if you want to stay tuned for that kind of stuff, be sure to subscribe and everything like that, so when those videos get posted. And without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the first leaked card from this last cycle of Modern Horizons 3. So here we have Ocat Pride, which is a 1 white for a 1/1 cat that has first strike and lifelink and the Ascend ability. So Descend was kind of a new thing that they added to the previous, Lost Caverns of Ixalan set, and essentially just wanted permanent cards to go into your graveyard, where Ascend says that if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game, which is an emblem type thing that exists outside of the game that doesn't really do anything on its own, but has cards that care about, having the city's blessing. So definitely more constrained to the original Ixalan, and then the Lost Caverns. No, that's not Lost Caverns. I can't remember what the other Ixalan set was after that. But basically to that mini block of cards, just really cared about having the city's blessing. I'm sure there's probably some commander cards out there that care about it, but we spend too much time talking about the city's blessing. I would not be blessed if I kept talking about it. So you have this 1-mana 1/1 first strike lifelink. Not bad in terms of when you think about, a bunch of 1 toughness creatures having first strike. This is going to win combat a lot of the time outside of any external factors. So already kind of neat. At the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. Then if you have the city's blessing, for each token you control that enters the battlefield this turn, create a token that's a copy of it. So Ocat Pride, I can imagine kind of snowballing on its own, where if you playing 2 or 3 of these is pretty, I would say pretty devastating, because you just deal damage with one of them, and even if one dies, you have the other one to create tokens. It's going to help you get to the point where you can ascend and get the city's blessing, in some kind of token deck that could potentially exist in the format. We'll have to kind of see how things go, but this is definitely a way that you can kind of ramp your way into getting the city's blessing. And if you think about making a 1/1, and then you have Ocat Pride trigger to make a copy of that 1/1, and then you have a second Ocat Pride that makes a third one, and then it's going to make 6. So with 2 Ocat Prides, you can make 6 cat tokens on the battlefield, and then it gets even more, because then you make your you have a third one, then it goes up to 6, and then you go to 7, it goes to 14 with multiple copies. So if you have a way to kind of copy Ocat Pride or protect multiple copies of them, you're going to be in pretty good shape, considering the fact that you're just going to make so many just cats, so many 1/1s. I mean, if you're making 6 1/1s a turn, barring anything from the Leyline plus Scion decks or whatever, you could potentially race some of the other decks that are trying to just race you, period, just by the fact of having 20, 30 1/1s on the battlefield. I mean, most decks aren't going to be able to gain enough life to kind of beat it, and it feels pretty bad having to use removal spells on Ocat Prides, which are just 1/1s. when you think of cards like, Return to the Ranks, to kind of get these plus some other smaller creatures back, maybe get some like the Soul Sistery kind of stuff going. Definitely just another payoff for kind of like those life gain decks where you can just gain a life or two, every turn, and then you're going to be able just to keep continuing to make 1/1s and stuff. Definitely not the most broken thing that you could be doing in Modern. Of course, we all know that, but definitely an interesting card nonetheless that just kind of snowballs, and you can actually play multiple copies of, and it actually be like really good to play multiple copies of them, because I believe even just making 6 cats on turn 2 or whatnot, like making 6 cats on turn 2, you could probably end up getting the City's Blessing after that, and then you're going to have like future turns where you're just going to absolutely go off with like Ocelot Pride and whatnot, and just in general make it very hard for your opponent to kind of deal with a board full of cats, even if they're getting to do unfair things like Goryo's Venturing Back at Atraxa, or getting to play like Scion on turn 2 off of 2 fetch lands, and things like that. So just an interesting card nonetheless. Probably not going to make a super huge impact on the format compared to some of the other, like mythic rares and rares that are in the set, like even some of the uncommons. But it's definitely an interesting card that kind of like slots into an archetype that has been towards like the low end of relevancy, if at all relevant, and could potentially, boost it even a little bit to make it a deck that could potentially, see play maybe at the FNM level, or maybe even like in the future RCQ season coming up. So just definitely something interesting to kind of look for and be on the lookout for, when the set officially drops, and if this card is officially spoiled, because it could just be a neat addition to the format and do something like really cool, not to mention too that you could just make other types of tokens, and Ocelot Pride will then like double those tokens. So again, pretty neat, something interesting to build around, just kind of like plays off of itself and plays really well with some other things, which is unlike most cats, so I've heard. So that is Ocelot Pride. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next card. Sort of keeping up with the cat theme, as you can see a little bit from the art on Primal Prayers. So this is a 4-mana enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Then you may cast creature spell. Well, so it's a separate type line. So you may cast creature spells with mana value 3 or less by paying energy rather than paying their mana cost. If you cast a spell this way, you may cast it as though it had flash. So this is similar to something like Aloran, where like way back in the day, like Aloran was like I believe a 4-mana enchantment that says that you could play creatures with mana value 3 or less, without paying their mana cost, and as though they had flash, and it was like its own kind of like combo deck and stuff. I'm sure that there are some creatures in here that you could find a way to like bounce them and then like generate like infinite ETBs, so you can and things like that. So I believe like there's like the Greenbelt Rampager or whatever that forces you to pay 2 energy when it comes into play. So like you could, in theory, like bounce it and find ways to at least get into play, like net some energy as well. There's plenty of different creatures that provide energy when they come into play, and if you can find ways to kind of like balance them, maybe some like Cloudstone Curio stuff, you can end up generating like infinite energy. And with some of the energy payoffs that are in the set, there's some decent ones that you can kind of go into. You have like Whirler Virtuoso, from back in the like Kaladesh block era. You can just end up making infinite 1/1s, given the fact that you are able to, generate the energy, pay the energy, and then find a way to bounce it back and things like that. So definitely something to keep in mind when, seeing cards like this. It's very interesting. It's definitely another energy payoff. It's going to allow you to basically keep your mana open while also getting to play those creatures on your opponent's turn to, potentially protect them if at all possible, or if anything else, again, just be able to leave mana available to like activate some land abilities and stuff. So Primal Prayers, pretty cool looking card, definitely an interesting kind of like retrain on, a classic card from, the old days of Magic, while, giving it like kind of a new modern spin to it, and it's further incentivizing you to kind of build into this energy theme rather than, just being able to pay cost, pay mana value as of with energy, and then being able to cast creatures with flash, like regardless. So pretty neat, pretty cool redesign. Don't know how much impact this will actually have on the modern format, just the fact that it's a 4-mana virtually do nothing enchantment. I mean, you could play something off of it on the turn that you play it, like something with mana value of 2, so you can kind of in a way cheat on the cost a little bit, but we'll have to see kind of where things go from there. But there's some pretty powerful 1s and 2s in Modern, of course. So this deck could potentially be a thing. How good it's going to be, is yet to be seen. And, kind of look forward to just seeing if this card actually makes an impact on the format. So that is Primal Prayers. Let's go ahead and look at our second to last card that we have here. Next, we have Frogmere Enforcer, which is a 7 colorless 4/4 that has affinity for artifacts, and it also has the ability prototype that says you can cast a spell with a different mana cost, color, and size. It keeps its abilities and types. So essentially, you can play a Frogmite Enforcer for 1 red as a 2/2, or if you have 7 artifacts, it will end up being a 4/4, or reducing the cost further for like affinity for artifacts. So I point this one out because obviously Affinity has been kind of like a hot topic. It's been a deck that people have been playing around with and seeing a lot more play, given the fact of like Simulacrum Synthesizer being printed in the format, and of course some other cards that were spoiled in the Modern Horizons 3 set that could potentially turn Affinity back into a tier 1 deck in the format. And I don't know if them having another 7 mana Affinity for artifact creature necessarily helps, but I can't think that it hurts them either, for the fact that you can pay a red to kind of have like this 2/2. It's going to still count towards your artifact count, so then you can eventually just play other 7 mana things for more mana, or rather, I guess, less mana in a way. Again, getting to like trigger Synthesizer as well by paying it for its 4 mana cost as well. So this just being a card that synergizes with the probably best card in the Affinity deck. And just the fact that there is times where you're going to be able to play this for free. A 4/4 for 0 mana is not nothing, especially when you get other additional triggers off of it. This could potentially lead to like some differences like in the mana base, because I believe like Sanctum of Ugin, you can end up like cracking it and going and getting another 7 cost thing, which could eventually lead to you getting to like keep comboing with like Simulacrum Synthesizer, making more constructs and kind of like putting your opponent under an immense amount of pressure to kind of deal with your board of like 4/4s and 2/2s, and end up also having to deal with like the 13/13s and the 14/14s and stuff. So also pretty neat, like Frogmere Enforcer. I mean, like we have Frogmite and something Enforcer. I can't remember the name. It's like the 7 mana 4/4 with affinity for artifacts. So it's kind of like a nice cross between like both of them, and it's a frog. So I mean, that's pretty neat. But just this being kind of another potentially free creature for the Affinity deck that it is on either half of it is going to trigger your best card while also synergizing with like your artifact synergies is, all purposes is like a really, really good card. And I can't imagine, if anything, that this is bad for the Affinity deck. It's just going to kind of like, okay, instead of playing all the free creatures that we can play, now there's like kind of a discussion on like, do you cut like Mirror Enforcer, which is the card. I guess I should have known that, Frogmite Mirror Enforcer. Pretty neat. Anyway, if you have to cut like Mirror Enforcers or Sojourner's Companions and play some out of this, or you end up playing all of them and you're essentially like full on this, super expensive like artifact train, and then basically just trying to go off that way and just make as many constructs as possible and stuff. So definitely neat, definitely interesting card. I could definitely see this seeing play, especially with like an uptick in the Affinity decks. How many copies people end up playing with this card, if any, obviously is yet to be seen. But with some of the other cards that have been printed in the format, it looks like Affinity is going to be a pretty good choice going forward for the modern format. So that's it for Frogmere Enforcer. Let's go ahead and take a look at our last card from the MH3 leaks, which potentially leads us to a card that can be pretty dangerous for the format, I would think. So Buried Alive, 3 mana, you search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them in the graveyard, then shuffle. So this is not inherently broken. Just like if you do this in a fair way, like most things, it's fine. Getting you put 3 creatures in the graveyard, maybe you're able to kind of get one of them back, whatever. Buried Alive in Legacy and stuff, where you have things like Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual and things like that, you'd see Buried Alive paired with Arclight Phoenix, where you go like you play like on turn 2 a Dark Ritual into a Buried Alive, you ditch 3 Phoenixes, and then you play like a Brainstorm or something like that. Doesn't really matter, like Brainstorm, then fetch Dark Ritual, Buried Alive, you end up putting 3 Phoenixes in the graveyard and you end up bringing them back. So immediately that's kind of what my brain goes to, is just like kind of comparing like the Legacy equivalent of like Grixis Phoenix like back in the day to like now you could potentially play that in Modern, is that better than, anything else that's going on in the format? Maybe not. But this is a way that you can get multiple creatures in the graveyard. So kind of like the single targeted like graveyard removal isn't going to be all that good. Not like there's a whole lot of it going around the format to begin with, but it is just kind of like that extra layer of like playing like 1 or 2 copies of this card are fine, because you're just going to be able to put multiple things in the graveyard. And then, with something like a Living End, could technically play this card just to put 3 creatures in the graveyard. Probably, better for them, but a little less good, because again, you're kind of wanting to pair this with like getting back, like Grizzlebrands and Atraxas and whatnot, not getting back Street Wraiths and like Oliphants and things like that. But nonetheless, like, this is a card that is potentially very powerful. It can do some pretty crazy things, getting you to put multiple creatures in your graveyard as like kind of a dredge type of thing too. You can end up putting like 3 dredgers in the graveyard, and then you can end up getting back, like the zombies and whatnot, and all the other crazy stuff that like dredge and like these other graveyard decks can get. Is it a tool that they needed? I don't know if they necessarily needed other options to enable what they have going on, but Buried Alive is a pretty sweet card. At 3 mana, it's essentially a do nothing on the first turn that you play it, or on the turn that you play it in most cases. But, if you get to kind of untap with like a graveyard intact, there's some pretty busted things you can do with Buried Alive. So that is kind of like my evaluation of it. Is, again, like any of these other cards, is it going to break into the Modern format and absolutely break things? Probably not, but it is kind of worth pointing out because it is a very powerful effect in the right decks. Of course, on a baseline, just kind of like, again, dredge and other graveyard decks and stuff. But, it is what it is. We'll kind of see the impact that it has on the format. So, but yeah, that is going to do it for me and these Modern Horizons 3 leaks, and then we'll be going into spoiler season here soon, where we'll kind of be covering the spoilers in longer form videos and shorts as well. So if you want to be a part of that stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring notification bell so when those videos get posted. Be on the lookout again for those videos going over individual cards and then large batches of spoilers as we kind of kick off spoiler season next week with Modern Horizons 3, easily one of the most anticipated Modern sets of all time. We know Modern Horizons 1 and 2 have been bangers. They've absolutely pushed the format to new heights, and I expect Modern Horizons 3 to do the same once we get some official spoilers and stuff. So that's going to be for me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you all in the next one.